Hey guys, thank you for being here. I'm Eugene Sepulveda. I'm the co-founder of Culturati, and we're really thrilled that you are joining us for the inaugural Culturati Live. We're doubly thrilled that Jeremy Hunter, one of our most popular speakers at any Culturati, not only agreed to be our first speaker, actually reached out to us first. Jeremy is the drug professor. And, I can't imagine what a better pedigree to be relying on when we're thinking about strength and reflection and learning through crisis than to be the great grandson of a sumo wrestler. Is that for real, Jeremy?
That's true. It's true.
Oh, fabulous. You have to send me a photo of your great grandfather at some point.
I will do that right when we're done.
Jeremy serves as the associate professor of practice at the Peter Drucker Graduate School of Management. He's the lead faculty member for Weatherhead Executive Education's Mindfulness for Effective Leadership Certificate Program. Nearly 2 decades, he has helped leaders transform themselves while retaining their humanity in the face of monumental change and challenge. Jeremy's designed and led leadership development programs for a wide variety of organizations, including Fortune 200 Aerospace, Fortune 50 Bank and Finance, accounting, the arts, civics, and nonprofits. Program impacts have been both positive, professional, personal, and had positive financial outcomes for participants. Jeremy's been featured in the Wall Street Journal, The Economist, the Financial Times, Los Angeles Times, National Public Radio. And he has been informed by the experience of living day to day for 17 years with a potential terminal illness. When faced with the need for life-saving surgery, more than a dozen former students came forward with organ donations. Dr. Hunter received his PhD from the University of Chicago, and he holds his degree from Harvard and Wittenberg University as well. I just have to shout out to Josh and Liz Jones-Dilworth at JDI, who had become friends with Jeremy a while back and have engaged Jeremy in their practice and just have raved about him. Jeremy, thank you.
Eugene.
We are going.
Thanks, team. Yeah, thanks to everybody, Eugene and Sophia and Maria and Emery and the Jones Dilworths. And I had a fantastic time in Austin with you guys at Culturati. And so happy to be here, and it's an honor to be with you. So I thought the graphic was great, and the title of this program comes from this Haruki Murakami, a Japanese novelist, his novel Kafka on the Shore. But one thing is certain: when you come out of the storm, you won't be the same person who walked in, and that's what this storm's all about. And we all know what the storm is, and the question is, how are we going to come out of it on the other end? And Eugene mentioned, for 17 years, I lived with a potentially terminal illness, not knowing if the next day was going to be my last. And so living with uncertainty was something I just kind of got used to. And it turned out that my profession is helping people to live and make good decisions in uncertain environments. And so how do we make the storm something that's a positive, growth-oriented event where at the other side of it, you're stronger, you're more well connected to your environment, you're more effective, you're more loving, you're more capable, right? And to me, that's a matter of skill. It's not a matter of being born with that ability. It's something that I had to learn, and that I think something that we all can learn and probably will all need to learn before too long, because certainly this isn't the last storm we're going to face. So one of my core values is that no great life was lived without facing a great challenge. And how do we start to engage the great challenge? And furthermore, if you're in the position of being a leader, how do you create a platform of strength from which to lead, right? How do you create an internal platform of strength from which to lead, and so that your the quality of your internal state manifests itself in a positive way externally. And so that's really the heart of the work I do. So here's the title. That's what I do for my day job. And here's what we're going to do today. So first, we're going to do a little check-in. Just how's everybody doing? Then I want to share with you 3 principles for managing your own experience, managing what happens inside you. How do you do that effectively? And it's something that we're rarely ever taught in school. And so we'll spend a little bit of time on that. Then we'll talk about how are you managing fear. Now, I like to say that if you're not managing your fear actively, then your fear is probably managing you. And how do we understand that? And what are some practices that we can put in place to do that better? What zone are you in? That'll be clear in about 15 minutes what that means. We'll do an exercise about how do you draw on your inner resources and find resources maybe that you didn't know you have, which I think is one of the virtues of living through challenge, is that you can find strength, you find capacity, you find a willpower that you wouldn't necessarily have found in a smoother time. And to me, that's the blessing of challenge and what it can offer us. And then if we have time, we'll do some Q&A. Okay. So as Eugene mentioned, let's start with a question, right? So in your chat box, there is going to be a link. So click on that link. There we go. On the link, type in a word, and then what we're doing now is just seeing all your answers kind of sort themselves. You know, as you well know, right, the bigger the word, the more people are using that same word. So anxiety and anxious, the biggest one. Uncertain is the other. Interesting. Hopeful and uncertain are kind of neck and neck. Tired, right? Resigned, helpless, uncertainty, fragile, excited, grateful, hopeful, committed, right? Beautiful. Grieving. Yeah, we've lost a world, a familiar world. No, we're not. Navigate, preparing, disappointed. Look at that. Resigned. Interesting. Curious. Tired. I think that's good. All right. So just spread from anxiety to light, just pop, optimistic, tired. Keep that in mind. There we are. What's one word? I did this with 300 people yesterday, and here was their word. Interestingly, right? Fairly similar. And what are we doing? Right? What are you doing? What are you feeling right now? And that gets us to one of Peter Drucker's first axioms about managing oneself. Right? You can't manage other people unless you manage yourself first. Right? Starting with your own mind, and leadership is defined by results. And so, how I take these 2 statements and put them together is that an inner game we have to play, and we have an outer game we have to play. My guess is we're all pretty good at the outer game. And as a culture, we don't get much training on how to deal with the inner game. Right? How do you deal with the emotions, which are oftentimes conflicting, the storylines in your head, the physical sensations in your body? You know, a lot of people tell me lately, "Oh, I'm clenching my jaw. I've got tension in my neck. I've lower back." Acting out. You manage stuff that's happening inside so that you can more effectively deal with what's going on out. And then, moreover, how do you do it right now? How do you do it in the moment? And that's the real trick. Let me go back one slide. archetypal example of that for me is a client I've been working with for many years, and it's a financial services company. They're in a meeting with a partner I've worked with is in a meeting with a key client, multi-million-dollar client. Sitting in the room says something inflammatory. A wave of anger shoots through the place. My client partner notices that that anger is inside her too, and she grabs the table edge and holds on to it. And that gives her a place to focus her attention and not get carried off by this wave of anger. And once the wave subsides inside her, right, she turns outward into the room, kind of acknowledges what's everybody feeling, what's going on in everybody. And then she manages to redirect people's attention to a better place. The client, who had been shuffling his papers to get ready to leave, puts his papers down, and the meeting was saved. Had he walked out, that could have been her career. And so, because she was a very good practitioner of this, and she tried really hard, and when we learned, she mastered that ability, and it really saved her career. And so that was somebody who was able to simultaneously manage inside, the outside, and act effectively. And so that's what this chart is meant to convey. Okay, because you may have noticed that a lot of the time, what's going on inside us at any given moment is kind of a mystery. I read a statistic recently that said only a third of people can tell you what they're feeling in any given moment, right? So that means 2/3 of us are kind of flying without being able to read the gauges. And how the relevance of that is that what you're feeling, what's going on inside, the stories in your head, the sensations in your body are affecting your capacity to see what choices are available to you, what choices you make, what action you take, and eventually the result you get. And so by having a much more fine-tuned in the moment awareness of what's going on inside you, you can make better choices, like my client, right? So it's like how to increase the resolution of your control panel so that you can see really what's happening, right? So that gets us to principle number one. We're going to talk, as I said, we're going to talk about the 3 principles of managing your own experience. Principle is acknowledge what you're experiencing right now, which is why we did that word cloud. One way of just taking the temperature, see like what's happening inside you right now. And a lot of leaders I've been talking to over the last couple of weeks, that they're running so fast just to keep things afloat, or to make the shift to working at home and all the other shifts we have to make. They haven't stopped to consider that, right? What's actually happening inside me? I did this with a group last week, and the person who had signed her group on said, I did this for my group, but I didn't realize how much I needed this for myself as well. Right? So simply stopping to take a look to see what's, and which I think let's try this in a little bit more robust way. Just so right now, let's do a little experiment. What's happening in your body? Is there tension somewhere? Do you feel relaxed somewhere? Do you feel excited somewhere? Do you feel tired somewhere? Like where do you feel that? Where do you feel that? Where do you sense that? And then the emotions that are there. Like we saw that whole list of emotions, right? What do you notice happening? And then what are the stories in your head? I had a student say to me the other day, like, oh, when is this going to end? I can't see the end of this. So that was her story. And because she couldn't see the end of it, that fed her own anxiety about it. And so let's just take a minute. Like, what do you notice happening right now? And if you want to type something in chat, that would be great. Right? What's going on inside? Focus. Okay. In here again, yeah? Tired. Uncertain every day. So where do you notice tired? Adapting to riding the wave. Yeah.
Someone said they're
Notice tired.
hungry.
Say it again. Hungry.
Someone said they're constantly hungry.
Constantly call those the corona carbs, like which is all the junk food we've been eating in the last 3 weeks. Alternately energized, exhausted, foggy at times, and then lucid. Yeah. So keep that in mind, right? That you can take the temperature, and the temperature can be different depending on the hour. That you're on target, you're running at top speed, everything's good, and then bam, the energy goes somewhere else. And that in different waves across the day. One of my students said, I move from feeling these intense moments of appreciation that I'm alive to I don't want to get out of bed. So just notice that that's normal. Hopeful for new improved beginnings, right? I asked the question, where do you experience tiredness, right? Neck, shoulders, and brain. So feel detached. So noticing where you feel tired, we'll go into that in a second, but noticing where you feel tired is an important thing to do. So I'll come back to that in a minute. That's great. So principle 2. Principle 1 is simply acknowledging what you're experiencing, like we just did right now. And principle 2 is learning to accept that right now I'm tired. Right now I feel on top of the world. That the acceptance allows the experience to flow. Resisting it, fighting it, denying it creates more struggle. It's like friction. It's resistance in a wire. And so that creates a lot of wasted energy. And so simply start to notice, is there even a subtle part of you that doesn't like what's happening right now? Or you would prefer to be having a different experience? This week said, I just realized the experience I'm having, I prefer that it would be different. But, at this point, we don't have that choice. And so what we know is that when you can accept and allow what you're experiencing, right, the inner struggle starts to decrease. Okay. This is from some unsolicited feedback from a colleague of mine whose husband works in healthcare. Attended the version of this workshop I did for my own university staff, and she went home and shared this with him. And he said, when he started to view his anxieties and his triggers as part of the process of moving forward, he found that he was able to bounce back quicker, right? And so it wasn't always perfect, which I'm glad she said that, because it's true, it's not always perfect. But when he actually taps into this process of stopping and identifying sensations in a weird way, it makes him feel more calm and in control, letting them control him. That's like pure gold. So what happens when you just stop and simply acknowledge and accept this is what's going on inside me right now? And for those of you who are leading teams, how do you have that? Here's a little sciencey part that says basically the same thing. This is research done at Carnegie Mellon, finding that it's the acceptance process that creates a kind of validity and effectiveness, right? So accepting what you're feeling helps you keep it together, basically. Okay. So yeah, David has this comment in the chat box, right? It's like fighting against the current versus using the current to move forward. That is exactly it. So how do we move forward? How do we usually do this, right? How we usually do it is that we push away, deny, or distract what we're experiencing. Because you might have a story about how you deal with your own experience. Maybe in your family, we just pushed it in the closet and pretended it wasn't there growing up. Right? And on the other side, you grasp onto a thought, you amplify it, you catastrophize. This is catastrophization, let alone whatever external catastrophe is happening. right? So the catastrophization process happening inside amplifies or distorts your ability to perceive clearly what's going on outside, let alone to take effective action with it. And then we have what we're talking about, like the third option, which is how do you just surf with it, right? And it's going to David about like how do you move with the current. So the better, this is a skill, and it's a skill that's better practice starting with small things and move on to bigger things, because you can take on too much and it can get too overwhelming. But simply notice, when are there moments of resistance in your experience, like I don't like this, and experiment with it to see like what happens when you drop the resistance. Does something shift? Like my colleague's husband, right? 9 times out of 10, I'm going to guess you probably will see something shift. You'll feel a clarity or a lightness, and that's something you can experiment with. Okay, so then principle 3. So principle 1 is acknowledging what you're experiencing. Principle 2 is accepting what you're experiencing inside. And then principle 3 is like attention needs somewhere good to go. And the most obvious one is like decide for yourself how much news is good for you, and what's your limit, and when you disengage and shift your attention to something else. So in this kind of time, it's really easy to get over focused on the threat. And I'm not saying that the threats aren't real, but you can get over focused and consumed and obsessed with them, and that inhibits the capacity to be clear. So think consciously, how are you using your attention? How is your team using your attention? How is your family using its attention? One of my axioms is that we don't manage time, we manage attention. And if you're in the situation of you're working from home, and now you have 2 kids who are now studying from home, you realize that the truth of this statement, right? That everybody needs their attention managed. My son is 4, and so in the last 6 weeks, he's gotten a sandbox to absorb his attention. We got a lot of craft stuff to absorb his attention. And so thinking about how are you all using your attention and what you. So this is feedback from a past student. Like I felt like I'd pulled myself out of the cul-de-sac I had driven myself into, and I became more hopeful and my energy came back. Simply by learning to shift attention in a different place. So this is from another past participant who said, basically what she's saying is that I'm stuck in my house all day and I'm worried about what's going to happen next. And in that process, I can kind of injure myself in terms of I'm going to back myself in a corner, and I'm going to lose my capacity to make choices. So what are you giving your attention to? And we can do this in a lot of different ways. We can examine this from a lot of different ways, but how are you prioritizing your day? How do you make space for attention in terms of what you're focusing on is probably one of the key skills we have to really pay attention to now. So let me get through this. So what we're going to do is look at next, how do you manage a nervous system and how do you manage fear? And is fear managing you? Right? So how do you manage your fear, right? Or is fear managing you? What's fear? Fear, I like to think that there are not positive or good emotions and negative bad emotions. There are just emotions. And that the emotions all have a role to play in the human adventure, right? And that the role that fear plays is essentially protective. It's there to protect you, but it's there to protect you from predators that are like short-term threats, immediate short-term threats to your survival. And so the fear reaction creates energy to fight off that threat, to escape from the threat, or to freeze and hope that the threat walks by. That's what we're naturally wired to do. And that And that process will activate automatically without wanting it, right? Which is indicative of that first chart or the first word cloud we did. But today, what I like to do is stick like a little coronavirus right in the middle of this image, right? The threats we face are far more abstract. And in this case, it's one we can't even see. Right? So that this protective system doesn't really match what you actually need to be doing to be effective, to protect yourself from this threat, from the threat of this virus. Right? We need a lot of intelligence to protect ourselves. So then simply just running away or fighting it. So when we talk about managing yourself, one way of thinking about that is like, how do you manage your nervous system? Right? How do you manage your fear reaction? So what's going on? The nervous system, you can think of it as divided into two branches. Right? The part on the left, the parasympathetic nervous system, is all about relaxation. Right? And your heart rate goes down, your muscles relax, you breathe more easily, your digestion is working better. That's a nice place to be. And the other side is the sympathetic nervous system, which is like the gas pedal. Right? So your heart rate goes up, your muscles tense, right? You breathe more quickly, conversion of glycogen to glucose, right? That's all the carbohydrates and fats and salts and sugars you've been eating in the last 4 weeks. We know there's a relationship between chronic stress and diabetes, and that's one reason. And then the adrenaline we all like, right? And so if we think about this from a different way, you have these kind of three zones, right, which I referred to earlier. That where we like to be is the green zone, which is like where we're coherent. Right? It's like how do you be an island of coherence in otherwise what is a sea of chaos? And that's what the leader needs to be. Like the more coherent the leader is in this sort of situation, the more effective everyone else is going to be. If the leader is stuck in the red zone, right, which is like too much gas pedal, too much energy, and moving into a defense state, right, not only is it not good for the leader, it's not good for the team either. And eventually, as I said, right, this is the zone of adrenaline, and then at some point, your body's capacity to make more adrenaline stops, and we sink into the black zone. So that's where there's exhaustion, there's burnout, depression, all of those sorts of things. So let's take a look. So the red zone, this is where I'm guessing a lot of us have been. And the food we've been eating, the hamster wheels going around, it's hard to sleep or relax. FDS is frivolity deficiency syndrome. You lose your sense of humor, and you get obsessed with kind of dark pictures. So this is a highly energized state. This is a pot that's boiling over. And if it keeps boiling too long, we sink into here. So this is not a pot that's boiling over. This is a pot that's frozen. So we give up, right? In fact, we saw resigned in the first word cloud. Disconnection, depression, exhaustion. The primary remedy for this is rest, right? Because the adrenal system has been exhausted. And so it's important to take rest. In fact, people I've been talking to, this is true in normal situations, but it's even more true now, is thinking about your quality of sleep and making sure sleep is your primary strategic priority, because that is going to help your immune system, and it's going to help the system that you need to be effective, including your brain, right? Which helps us stay here, which is our green zone, right? Leading from this place of coherence, this internal coherence. And so so then the question is, when do I leave this zone? How do I get back to this zone? And then how do I make the zone wider? Right? How do I make my capacity bigger to be here? Because here's where we're our most intelligent, our most resourceful, our most adaptive, right? All the skills we need and will continue to need in the coming days and months, if not years. Because after the virus is over, we're going to have to deal with the cleanup of the secondary and tertiary effects on the economy and society of what this has done. So how do you be an island of coherence in a sea of chaos? Right? And thinking about, okay, if what you're experiencing right now is frustration, anger, and impatience, how does that influence your choices? Does that open up choices for you, or does that limit choices for you? And how does that affect the action you take and the result you get? Right? Versus at this situation from a point of creativity, right? Can I be appreciative about what's happening? What are the good things that are happening right now? Right? Can I find that place of calm or even a joyfulness in the sense of we're alive, right? We're alive, and now here's a challenge to step up, to show the world who you are, right? And how does that influence your sense of choice, action, and result? So, if we think about it this way, so what's important is to know, like, what are your tells? If you think about red zone, green zone, black zone, like what are the lights that go off on the dashboard that say, hey, I'm headed towards the green zone, or I'm headed towards the red zone, or I'm headed towards the black zone, or what does feeling good feel like? What does each one of those zones look like, sound like, and feel like to you? Take a minute and think about that. Like, what does that look like? And then what are the tells of the people around you? My wife and I have a check-in 3 times a day, basically, like every meal, just because as this situation is fluid and dynamic, right, our own responses to it are going to be fluid and dynamic. We've lost something. Right? The world of January 15th, 2020, and the world of what's April 17th, 18th, 19th, 2020 is a totally different world. And so that's inherently an unstable time. So how often do you check in with the people around you and the people who are important to you? And here's some words you could use if you want some. Like simply, like, how are you doing? How's everybody doing? What's on your mind? What concerns do you have? And just making this a regular practice. It's the support of one another that gets us through these situations. So let's just take a minute. Like, so red zone equals tight chest, right? What else do you notice? What do you notice? Is a kind of narrowing, like a narrowing of their perception that they kind of focus on what's happening right now. For some people, it's the words they use are less charitable. Some it's a short fuse. Some it's a tiredness. Right? We talked a little bit earlier. The exhaustion in the eyes of looking at screens all day and interacting with them. What do you notice? Okay. Breathing is not right. In the sense that it's too shallow. Right? Black zone, I can't make an easy decision, like what to eat, what to do after the kids go to bed. Yeah, right. Okay, too shallow. Yeah. Which is that's a really good noticing, right? Because the shallow breathing, we unintentionally breathe in a shallow way, and then that also can feed a process of anxiety unintentionally. So maybe one thing to do, we'll do a little practice in a second, like maybe one thing to do is just to stop every so often and just notice what is the quality of your breathing. And just take a deep breath. My son, who is 4, as I mentioned earlier, right? We taught him how to do that. So you hear this little 4-year-old inhale and exhale. And we say, everything okay? And then it say, oh, everything's okay. Looks like making a lot of list and overfunctioning. Oh, so we go into overdrive. Right? Let's do a little experiment. How do you get from red to green? I'd like to do this exercise with you, and you will receive this hand. This is an exercise called resourcing, and it's a way of kind of shifting the function in your nervous system in a way that's basically kind of enjoyable. And a resource is anything that helps you feel good, strong, loved, or safe, and that there there are resources that are outside you and there are resources that are inside you. So examples of resources outside you are experiences you've had, places you've been, and favorite places you like going, who are, right? Mentors or loved ones, people who've helped you, pets that soothe you, right? And pets, interestingly, more often than spouses will make this list. But in a group I worked with a couple of weeks ago, the dog was the highest rated resource. Pieces of music you find soothing, right? So all sorts of things. Resources inside you are things you like about yourself, beliefs or values, spiritual or religious image that sustain or nourish you. So let's take a minute to just think about what are some resources that you have. And you can go back to the chat box and then go to the link again and just share what your resource is. Good. There's some honesty in the room. Prayer. Let's hope prayer, masturbation at some point. Family and the dog. Books, humor, right? Exercise, going outside, music, yoga, creativity. Right? Look how the list is building. Exercise, nature. So look, that everybody has a resource. In 20 years of doing this, everybody's had business, spouse, your wife. That's beautiful. Okay, the cat contingents made their presence known. Oh, the husband is there. Good. Meditation. Okay, beautiful. So let's go through next step. Look at how this keeps building. What I love about this is that everybody has different kinds of resources. And so maybe you can draw from here. So shift back to PowerPoint. So let's take it the next step. So pick one of the resources. Pick one of the resources, and just right now, notice like what's going on in your body. You can do it with eyes open or you can do it with eyes closed. It's probably easier to do with eyes closed if that's comfortable for you. And then bring to mind the resource. And if right now, what would you be seeing, hearing, and feeling? Place, like what are you seeing? As a person, like what are you hearing? And then notice where in the body, first of all, notice what's changing as you do this. And then where in the body experiencing this? Where in the body does it feel pleasant or good? You want to refresh the resource, that's fine. If you want to shift the resource, that's fine too. Things feel, if not good, at least neutral. And then put your attention there. And as you put your attention there, in the place where it feels pleasant, what do you notice happens next? It's also true that some people's resources are multifaceted, and so there can be unpleasant parts about the resource. Somebody may have passed away, and then the sadness of that comes along. Then that's okay. If that happens, that's okay. Just say hello to it, and then shift your attention back. Just know what's changed. I'm going to put the link back up. And when you're ready, take a minute. Notice what's shifted. Put the link back up, and then type in the click the link, and then type in the box like, what did you notice change? What are you experiencing now? Calm. Again. Chilling, relaxed, hope, respiration, peace, light. Unclenches the jaw. Loosens, right? Peace. Beautiful. Look at that. Acceptance, anticipation. Right? Beautiful. So that was only, if I were, we would do it for like 20 minutes. Can you imagine what you feel like at the end of that? But one question I have for you is like, do you think your capacity to make good decisions is better in this place, or to see options, to be creative? How do you face you feel better equipped to face an adverse situation in this way, in this place? So I'll take a screenshot of this. If we compare it to the shot earlier, it looks very different. Great. Wow. Notice the two most common words, right? Anxious and uncertain versus calm and peace. And so that was only a few minutes. It was drawing on what you already have within you that maybe we forget about when things are challenging. The good news is everybody around you has also these same things. And how do you help people find that? Because as a leader, right, we have to be able to help our people stay in a good place. That's how we're going to get through this. And I've been, the image that comes to mind is like we are in a marathon, but that marathon is made up of a multitude of sprints. It's really important to see this as a marathon and not a sprint. And that, how do you pace yourself over time? And this is just one way you can do it. I'm not saying it's the only way, and you probably have your own ways, but what I want to do is help you be conscious of the ways that you have, and that there are tools available, right? Like the more that we can act from this resource state of peace and calm, right? Look at those words, right? Peace, calm, optimism, hopefulness. The better we are the more likely we are to find at least reasonable things that are facing us, some of which are going to be painful, right? So the acceptance of what you're experiencing is key to this, and without that, then we're off center. Let me put this current slide. Okay, so questions to consider. This is what I've asked all my leaders in the last 3 weeks. What is COVID-19 teaching you about you and your relationship to challenge. You didn't see before, whether that's the person at the checkout counter or your mail person or person making food for you. You see people in a different way than you have before. What interactions do you now see that you didn't see before? And I did a webinar a few weeks ago that had 500 people on it from all over the world. And we put people in rooms. And somebody from Norway was connected to somebody from California was connected to somebody living in Los Angeles, living in Japan. And they said it was such an amazing experience to have from 3 different places in the world experiencing exactly the same thing, right? And you start to see, right, that not only are we all interconnected, but how is the economy interconnected with the health system? What is the quality of health connected to the viability of a society? That these are all now, in normal circumstances, they're kind of invisible, but now we get to see all this web of interconnection. And then how do you relate to that? How much are you conscious of that in your daily life? And then what's your engagement with those interconnections? What has this shown you about our humanity takes the bench for a month and the skies over Los Angeles suddenly are clear in a way they haven't been in a long time? What does that mean about what recovery look like? Will it be a recovery to the old way of doing things, or is it recovery to something that's more in harmony with the planet we live on? And then finally, like, what has it clarified for you about what's important to you? And this is another conversation that's been coming up quite a lot, is that, it's really clarified to me, like, what is important in my life and what I need to focus on, what am I willing to let go of? And you're going to have your own answers to this. My job is not to give you answers. My job is to help you have questions. So that's all I have for now. And I have a TED Talk, How to Change Your Future, if you want to, a glutton for punishment and you want some more. It's about 15 minutes of your life if you so choose. But I'll turn it over to Q&A. And if any questions you might have or thoughts you want to share, happy to do that. So there's some great questions. Just we think about our feelings of anger, being angry about the situation. Anger can help achieve clarity. Anger about political muddling that never reaches any new level of clarity. So yeah, one role anger plays is to give energy, right? The question I have is it actually helping you achieve clarity, or does it just feel intensely focused? Is it opening up options for you, or is it shutting them down and channeling you into a specific route of action? But you get clear about what needs to be addressed and things you're ready to change. Yeah. And then at some point, my question would be, is it eating at you in a way that's destructive? And then, going back to Gene's comment, like, then how can you turn that energy into some kind of action? David, I find that anger about politics today seems hopeless. Yeah. How does that anger help you be effective? I guess is a question I have. I mean, I think certainly not alone in that feeling. It sometimes feels like we're on our own. Yeah, it certainly does, doesn't it? And so there, in the conversations I've had here, to the extent that it's possible, okay, what are the resources around you that you can tap? What are the resources around you that you can draw on? We're trying to build a coalition of the creatives who can address that situation. Yeah, beautiful. And that's the benefit of this kind of thing, right? find that not having to run all over the place, and I get a more meaningful work done by being home and not having to dress up, not having to run to different locations, or being able to be and being able to have contiguous time to focus on things. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure you're not alone. That for many people is the great blessing of this, is suddenly having time, right? Let me see if there's any more questions.
Jeremy, we've got a question in the Q&A. I'll go ahead and read it to you.
Please.
Comes
Sure.
from Chris. I've lost a loved one from COVID-19. Sorry, Chris, to hear that. Quote unquote, virtual mourning and separation from family make it even more difficult. Any ideas about creating new rituals to move through this loss experience?
Fantastic question. First, I'm going to send you guys an article I wrote on change and transition. And just to briefly talk about that, right? That changes, external changes happen in the world. You lose somebody important to you. We go through a period of kind of unwordness or wandering, which is part of what the mourning process is about. Like you're renegotiating what's the world like without this person, or any other kind. We're dealing in the realm of physical death, but we've also we're all also dealing with other kinds of deaths. Deaths of sense of security or sense of being able to recognize what's normal. There are all kinds of endings of a sort. That ritual for mourning, so it's interesting. This week is the 1-year anniversary for 2 people who've died in my life, and so I've been thinking about this exact topic a lot. One way to do it is how together to honor that person. And I had a friend die and couldn't make the funeral, but there was a virtual mourning board that was an interesting way of doing things, and videos and testaments to that person's life is how I've dealt with that. But I think that in places where how many tens of thousands of Italians died because of this, we will definitely start to see different ways. Further an openness to talking about death and the dying process, and then how do we get through that? In Japan, my father died 2 years ago, and he died in the United States, and the American experience of that was almost like a drive-through, to be quite frank. And in Japan, the grieving process is like multiple years long. It's intentionally has kind of periods associated with it. The first 49 days, and then the first 6 months, and then the first year, right? They're all periods that you come back to mark. And when I lived through that process, it was interesting because I realized, the funeral and this process wasn't for the person that died. It was for all of us that are left behind to help make sense and renegotiate the new world without that person. And so maybe what I might suggest is, instead of like one event, that you have a series of events, and then talk about like what's shifted in your relationship to that loss. I think is something that might be helpful. At least that's what's been helpful. I don't know if it's helpful for you, but that's my answer at this moment. Other questions, comments? I think that there's this frustration. Being at a business school, there's this frustration of feeling like we're in stasis and that we can't move. In Los Angeles, we've been on lockdown now for about 6 weeks, and when is business going to start up again? How much impact to the economy is this going to have? And there's also the biological reality of how these things work. And so that tension is really quite an interesting one to live through. Right? And I talk a lot about how do you maintain the capacity to be comfortable with the fact that you are intensely uncomfortable. And part of that goes back to what we've already talked about, is acknowledging the fact that right now I'm very uncomfortable and I'm worried about what's going to happen. But I think that focus, one suggestion I have is don't make deals with yourself that, oh, by X, Y, and Z date, things are going to be okay. Like we know from prisoner of war research that prisoners of war by X, Y, Z date, everything was going to be okay. And X, Y, Z date came and everything wasn't okay, that they're the ones that really had a hard time. And so how on a day-to-day basis, you deal with the reality that's in front of you, and to the extent you can prepare for what will the world need in the future. And as I think the opportunities as entrepreneurs is that you're uniquely equipped to think about worlds that don't exist and how you create them. I mean, that's to me what you do. And so thinking about what will this world need and how can you prepare for that? Maybe to think about that. Okay.
Jeremy?
I want to keep an eye on the clock on the wall. Thank you, Eugene. Thank you to the team. I really appreciate it.
And listen, tell me how much of your intuitive understanding of this space do you attribute to having had a terminal illness? And do you think any of it is cultural? Because I have many Japanese American friends and some Japanese friends who I'm just always amazed at how much calmer and longer term vision that they also take.
Absolutely. I think living with illness was a kind of like advanced graduate study in how do you thrive under uncertainty, I think. And not to say that it was always easy. I mean, there were times where I was completely paralyzed by anxiety and all of that. But I think what the lesson I learned from that was you have to keep your attention focused on something good. And even though, at one point I was really dying, I was like close. And still, one of my practices was to look at, okay, what a beautiful day it is. And I can remember a day where I had this insight that actually I wasn't a sick person. There was only one thing wrong with me. Right. Only one thing wrong with me. It was killing me, but the rest of me was healthy. And it helped me realize that, okay, that was the base of strength to build off of. The cultural part is really interesting because you've got, Japan is racked with disaster. It's part of daily life. If it's not an earthquake, a typhoon, and so in a way, as a culture, I think they're in a way better rolling with the punches. In some ways, my wife and I were discussing this last night that people are so used to it they don't take it seriously anymore. So you see that happening too.
Right. Any
Thanks.
Any closing insights for what we should do tonight and tomorrow?
Sit down with your loved ones and make a list of what is good in your life. That is the smallest, seemingly insignificant thing. And to do that regularly. So the reason why, that sounds like this kind of soft-headed thing, but the reason why is that it creates a counter network to all the things we're afraid of or that are scary.
Right.
And which is where we go to automatically. So we have to build this kind of alternative muscle system to reflexively see what's going well in the context of what are we dealing with. And that's where we maintain clarity. And it's when we go into those survival states, that's when we make decisions that are really short-sighted and usually
all participants.
Yep. Appreciate it.
Sophia, will you pin me perhaps? See if we can. This is our first WebEx large participant event. So we are learning, and Sophia and Maria have done an extraordinary job. Thank you guys. It's always the people in the background that do such good work.
Sure.
All right, well, we'll go as it is, and we're going to be sending out the PDF that you showed on the screen about resources and places, and everybody will receive that, and then we'll be sending out an evaluation to all the attendees as well. So thank you guys very much.
My pleasure. And I'll send you the link to the article on change.
Perfect. We'll get that out to everyone. Good night, everyone.
Take care, everybody.